Picture this, a $327 million spacecraft, humanity's first interplanetary weather satellite, hurtling toward Mars after a 9-month journey across space. Everything is perfect, until it isn't. The Mars Climate Orbiter vanishes without a trace, lost forever in the void. The culprit? One team used metric units, another used imperial. A simple conversion error that cost hundreds of millions of dollars. But here's the kicker. This wasn't really about math. It was about something far more insidious that's costing the U.S. economy alone $3 trillion every single year. That's trillion with a T. Welcome to Mindcast, the podcast that takes the most fascinating academic research and makes it actually useful for your life. I'm your host, Will, and today we're diving deep into one of the most expensive, invisible problems plaguing organizations everywhere, the dreaded silo mentality. We're exploring groundbreaking research from The Architecture of Collaboration, Overcoming Organizational Silos in Cross-Disciplinary System Design. And trust me, this isn't some dry academic theory. This is about why your projects fail, why innovation stalls, and why the future belongs to organizations brave enough to tear down the walls between departments. By the end of this episode, you'll understand the hidden psychology behind departmental warfare, discover a powerful law that predicts how your organization's structure literally shapes your products, and walk away with 3 concrete strategies you can implement tomorrow. Whether you're a team leader, entrepreneur, or just someone frustrated by bureaucratic nonsense, this one's for you. Let's start with a mind-blowing statistic. Organizational silos cost the United States economy $3 trillion annually. That's nearly 17% of our entire GDP just evaporating because departments can't work together effectively. But here's what's really fascinating. Silos aren't accidents. They're not some unintended consequence of growth. They're engineered, deliberately designed into our organizations. Think about it like this. Imagine you're trying to manage a massive, complex puzzle with 10,000 pieces. What do? You sort by color, by edge pieces, by patterns. You create smaller, manageable chunks. That's exactly what traditional management does with organizations. Marketing goes here, engineering there, sales over there. It makes perfect sense until it doesn't. The research reveals something incredible about human psychology in siloed environments. When you put people in these artificial departmental boxes, something called intense localized social reinforcement kicks in. Basically, your professional identity becomes completely shaped by your immediate departmental peers. Marketing people start thinking like marketing people. Engineers become more engineering-minded. Finance folks get increasingly finance-focused. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this is where game theory comes in. Remember, departments are typically measured and rewarded based on their own performance, not company-wide outcomes. So what happens? Each department head becomes a rational actor trying to maximize their own rewards. Bigger budgets, more personnel, executive visibility. They start playing what researchers call the bureaucrat's game. Picture this scenario. The marketing department desperately needs engineering resources for a crucial product launch, but the engineering department is worried that helping marketing will mean less time for their own projects, potentially hurting their performance reviews. So they start hoarding information, creating artificial barriers, protecting their turf. Sound familiar? The psychological term for this is cognitive dissonance. When these isolated subcultures are forced to collaborate, they literally can't understand each other. They're not speaking different languages metaphorically, they're speaking different languages professionally. A conversion means something completely different to marketing than it does to engineering, than it does to finance. Now, here's where things get absolutely wild. There's a principle discovered by computer scientist Melvin Conway in 1967 that predicts with scary accuracy how organizational silos will sabotage your products. It's called Conway's Law, and it states, Organizations which design systems are constrained to produce designs which are copies of the communication structures of these organizations. Let me break this down with a real example. Harvard Business School researchers studied software companies building identical products, financial management systems. Some companies had tightly integrated teams working in the same building. Others had distributed teams across different locations and departments. Guess what happened? The tightly integrated teams produced monolithic, interconnected software. The distributed teams produced modular, loosely connected systems. The products literally mirrored the organizational structure that created them. If you have 3 isolated departments working on an integrated system, you'll get 3 distinct, loosely connected components, whether that's optimal or not. Your organizational chart becomes your product architecture. Mind-blowing, right? This brings us back to that Mars Climate Orbiter disaster. The official investigation didn't just find a unit conversion error. They found inadequate consideration of the entire mission and its post-launch operation as a total system. Translation: the navigation team was fundamentally unfamiliar with the spacecraft's operational parameters. Teams were separated by discipline, geography, and rigid management chains. There was no boundary-crossing mechanism to translate information across teams. The spacecraft was doomed not by bad math, but by good silos. The artificial boundaries between development, operations, and navigation teams created the conditions where a simple conversion error could destroy hundreds of millions of dollars and years of work. But here's the good news. Some organizations have cracked the code. They've figured out how to harness the power of specialization without falling into the silo trap, and the solutions are both brilliant and surprisingly practical. Let's start with Spotify. Faced with scaling from 10 engineers to thousands, they could have gone the traditional route, separate departments for engineering, design, business analysis. Instead, they completely reimagined organizational structure. They created something called squads, small, fully autonomous teams with all the interdisciplinary skills needed to design, develop, test, and release features independently. But here's the genius part. They didn't abandon specialization entirely. They created chapters, horizontal groups of people with identical skills across different squads. All the database engineers meet regularly to share best practices. All the front-end developers establish technical standards. And they created guilds, voluntary communities of interest spanning the entire organization. This is what researchers called the reverse Conway maneuver. Instead of letting organizational structure accidentally dictate product architecture, you intentionally design organizational structure to match your desired product architecture. You're hacking Conway's law in your favor. The research also reveals the power of what's called T-shaped professionals. Picture the letter T. The vertical line represents deep specialized expertise in one discipline. You're a world-class software engineer or brilliant marketer, but the horizontal line represents the ability to collaborate across disciplines, communicate with experts in entirely different fields, and draw unexpected connections between disparate areas. Traditional organizations reward only the vertical line, deep specialization. Progressive organizations cultivate both. They want engineers who can talk to customers, marketers who understand technology constraints, and finance people who grasp operational realities. There's also fascinating research on something called boundary objects, tools, concepts, or frameworks that different disciplines can interact with meaningfully without requiring a shared mental model. Think about how a map works. A hydrologist uses it to assess water tables. An urban planner uses it for zoning laws. An economist uses it to model infrastructure costs. Same object, different purposes, perfect collaboration. But perhaps the most radical solution involves completely rethinking how we fund projects. Traditional budgeting allocates money to departmental silos, forcing them to compete against each other. The alternative is value stream funding. You fund cross-functional teams dedicated to delivering specific value to customers. Instead of a marketing budget and an engineering budget fighting over resources, you have a customer acquisition value stream with its own comprehensive budget. All right, let's get practical. You're probably thinking, this is fascinating, Will, but what can I actually do with this? Here are 3 concrete actions you can take, whether you're running a team or just trying to survive in a siloed organization. Action number 1, become a boundary spanner. Start learning the language of adjacent departments. If you're in marketing, spend time with engineering. If you're in finance, shadow some customer service calls. The research shows that individuals who can code switch between professional languages become incredibly valuable. You become the translator, the bridge, the person who can make things happen across silos. Action number 2, create boundary objects in your current projects. This could be a shared dashboard that different teams can interpret through their own lens, a customer journey map that sales and engineering can both reference, or even regular storytelling sessions where teams share how their work connects to customer outcomes. Find objects, tools, or practices that allow collaboration without forcing everyone to think identically. Action number 3. If you're in a leadership position, audit your incentive structures through the lens of Conway's Law. Ask yourself, if our organizational structure perfectly predicted our product outcomes, what would we produce? If that answer scares you, start experimenting with cross-functional teams, shared metrics, and collaborative funding models. Here's what I find most exciting about this research. It reveals that innovation isn't just about having smart people or good technology. It's about having the institutional courage to systematically dismantle the artificial barriers that keep brilliant minds artificially separated. The future belongs to organizations brave enough to architect collaboration instead of accidentally architecting isolation. The next time you see a project fail, a product disappoint, or an innovation stall, ask yourself, is this really a technical problem, or is this Conway's Law in action? The next time you feel frustrated by bureaucratic nonsense, remember, it's not just inefficiency. It's a $3 trillion economic disaster that we have the tools to solve. The research is clear. The successful adoption of cross-disciplinary technologies depends not just on engineering prowess, but on institutional courage. The courage to tear down the walls, the wisdom to architect collaboration, the commitment to turn organizational structure from a barrier into a bridge. That's it for today's episode of Mindcast. If this got you thinking, and I hope it did, share it with someone who's fighting the good fight against organizational silos. Hit subscribe so you never miss an episode where we transform fascinating research into practical wisdom you can actually use. Until next time, remember, every wall between departments is a wall between innovation and execution. The question isn't whether you have silos. The question is what you're going to do about them. I'm Will, and this has been Mindcast.